Welcome to Cloud on Air, live webinars from Google Cloud. We are hosting webinars daily. You're watching Ask the Expert, a unique show where each week we ask you to submit questions you need answered by Google Cloud experts. My name is Jay, and today we will be talking about Cloud Run. Joining me today is Darren. You can ask questions anytime on the platform, and we have Googlers on standby to answer them. So let's get started. I'm glad you were able to make it here.
Thanks for inviting me.
Right. So, what is it, about a month and a half ago during Cloud Next, we announced a brand new product that's pretty interesting, and I've noticed a lot of people have been talking about it, called Cloud Run.
That's right. We launched that next roughly a month ago. We've been in alpha for way longer than that, of course.
Of course, yeah. Now, technically, if we want to, technically we can say it was even longer than that if you want to talk about the open source component, but we'll get into that later. But a lot of people are asking, what is Cloud Run? So I think let's start with that.
Yeah, so Cloud Run brings serverless to containers. So it's basically a fully managed platform that allows you to run any stateless container on a serverless environment. And we have this version of Cloud Run, but we also have Cloud Run on GKE, which allows you to benefit from the same easy developer experience, but this time in your own GKE cluster. So Cloud Run on GKE.
Okay.
That's what we launched.
Okay, so basically Cloud Run is kind of fully managed, whereas you could say Cloud Run on GKE is partially managed because you still have to maintain your own cluster, but for the most part,
That's right. So the fully managed version of Cloud Run, you do not see any cluster. You just deploy your container and let Google take care of the rest. For Cloud Run on GKE, as a developer, you get the same experience. You get the same UI, the same CLI. You don't have to think in terms of cluster management. But part of your organization is managing a Kubernetes engine cluster to which you deploy.
Right, yeah, so basically separating the duties of developer and operator.
That's right.
Ops guys can manage the cluster, developers can just worry about coding in containers and not think about nodes and network or anything like that.
And in the case of the fully managed solution, it comes with a pay-per-use billing model. Of course, on the GKE side, you will, since your organization is managing and maintaining this Kubernetes engine cluster, it is actually also charged for it. On the fully managed side, you only pay for when you exactly use, Cloud Run. So that means when you send a request to it, your bill scales with the number of instances, and you don't send anything to it, then you don't pay anything.
Interesting. So we're talking a little bit about serverless, and Google has a lot of products that are called serverless or that we brand as serverless, such as Cloud Functions, App Engine. So to somebody out there who's watching and they're familiar with some of our other products, what's the difference between Cloud Functions, App Engine, and Cloud Run?
Yeah, so those three products are part of the serverless catalog of Google Cloud Platform. They all share the same infrastructure, as we mentioned previously in the webinar. But let's say that Cloud Functions is here as function as a service. You do one thing with Cloud Function. You deploy a function that does one thing, and it is automatically scaled for you. You don't have to think in terms of how do you handle the incoming requests, how do you handle the incoming events. You don't have to think about how you package this source code. You just deploy a function, you can trigger it on a list of many events that we provide, like Google Cloud Events, and you deploy it, you don't think about it. App Engine, it's the same. It scales up and down, scales down to 0 when needed. But here, App Engine will be more tailored at apps. So web apps, or maybe backends that in your architecture. And this is really about apps in a given set of languages. So App Engine supports a few languages, and if you are a Node.js developer, for example, we launched a Node.js on the App Engine standard environment. I think it was last year, and in that case, you write your Node.js app in your favorite Node.js framework, hit gcloud app deploy, and that's all you have to know. Your app is then automatically scaled. Cloud Run is even more capable. It allows you to run anything as long as this thing is stateless. So you don't want to store for a very long time state in your container, but containers as a packaging format allow you to deploy anything. So of course your favorite language, but maybe a language that App Engine does not support. Or maybe you want to bring it this custom binary that is not here in the App Engine environment. Or this OS package that you wish was available in the environment. And here, containers really are a way to package and distribute software. Cloud Run gives you the execution environment to run these on a serverless platform. So Cloud Functions do one thing, mostly from event-based triggers. App Engine, perfect for apps, web apps, in a given set of languages. And Cloud Run takes any container and deploy it on a fully managed platform, or, as we mentioned earlier, very easily in your GKE cluster.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds pretty robust. It sounds like it's kind of, in between the function as a service and platform as a service a little bit, because you can have the events, the HTTP events, or as we'll talk about later, there's other ways to do requests. You have all that, the same thing as functions, but you're not limited by runtimes where it's like, we can only code on the runtimes that we support. And then you're also not limited to the scope of snippets of code where it's like, I can only, input, output, that's it. Which is great for triggering specific events. If something's uploaded to storage, then do this with it or something. But in terms of larger jobs, not so great.
I think you have a good point. Cloud Run is like you take Google Cloud Functions, except that you remove the requirement to write your code in terms of function. But you keep all the rest. You keep the billing model, you keep the scalability, you keep the ease of use, except that, now we expand a little bit the definition of serverless, which originally was more focused on function as a service. And here, by removing the function requirement, serverless becomes, pay for usage, automatically scaled, no infrastructure management, managed security, but not necessarily the need to write your code in terms of functions.
Right. So since the announcement, and we're using it before in alpha, and now it's a public beta, how do you see people using Cloud Run on a day-to-day?
Yeah, so it's true that during the alpha, we've been very surprised by what people were trying to run on Cloud Run and what they successfully were running on Cloud Run. Things for fun, people have been running like Python 1, for example, the first version of Python. Well, if you can package it up into a container, you can run it on a serverless environment with Cloud Run. Of course, those are fun use cases. Some people deployed games to Cloud Run, but I would say two main categories of use cases. The first one is anytime you have a public website API backend that exposes a public endpoint. Cloud Run will really allow you to use your favorite framework in your favorite language and really allow you to not have to worry about scaling that part of your infrastructure. But we've seen a lot of our biggest customers using Cloud Run as a way to execute private microservices. So for example, they transform satellite images that are stored in cloud storage. Via PubSub, they send an event to a Cloud Run service, process that image, and store it back into cloud storage. Some people are doing small data transformation with Cloud Run, where it allows them to instantly scale many instances when they need them, and then when they don't need to transform things anymore, those instances scale to zero and they don't pay. So yeah, we've seen very interesting use cases on the private microservice to microservice kind of architectures. yeah, that's mostly like asynchronous tasks also has been something that we've seen where people use a queue of jobs,
Right.
for example, with cloud tasks, and then they these tasks are dispatched, are pushed to Cloud Run via Cloud Task HTTP targets, and those Cloud Run services are executing potentially long-running workloads, like 10 minutes or 15 minutes processing time, converting a video, for example. You have, imagine your website accepts video as input. Well, with Cloud Run, you can convert those videos as needed on the fly, as much as you need.
Yeah, I actually made a fun little demo that takes, you can upload a PDF, it parses it into JSON, and then uploads it to do a sentiment analysis using our natural language processing API. So it's a lot of cool things you can do just by containerizing the app. And we talk about containers a lot, and a lot of people, when they think containers, they immediately think Kubernetes or some kind of container orchestration tool. So there might be some people might be listening and thinking, oh, you're talking containers, but you're talking serverless, and you're talking Cloud Run and GKE. So I'm guessing we would say with Cloud Run, with containers, serverless containers, we should focus a little bit on the serverless part, and we're telling people that they build their own containers, but they don't have to actually manage anything underneath to run it like they would with a GKE today, correct?
That's right. So originally, containers have very shortly been associated with container orchestration. And here, of course, Google has launched Kubernetes, which has now become an industry standard to orchestrate containers. However, that is the orchestration part. With Cloud Run, you think in terms of containers as a packaging format, a way to package your software, a standard way to package your software, and to deploy it. But once you deploy it, you don't have any orchestration to do. This is done for you. It's like if Google is your operator now. Right. Google manages your cluster for you, and you don't even see the cluster with the fully managed version of Cloud Run.
Right. Yep, so it's all 100% abstracted. It's very developer-centric, to where the developers just worry about how they package their app into a container. They're not worried about, do I have enough node pools put together?
Exactly.
Or how do we exactly network? And nothing like that. That's all abstracted away by Google.
We have one customer, I was thinking about it a little bit, who is using Cloud Scheduler to do a scheduled task on Cloud Run. So what the Cloud Run service does, I think, is taking screenshots of web pages, or maybe even doing integration testing, by running Chrome, Chromium inside Cloud Run on a regular cadence. So for example, every day you want to take a screenshot of your website to compare it to the previous day. Well, you can do that on Cloud Run.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I know there's a lot of developers who are going to like to be able to do that without worrying about the infrastructure, since that is what takes up 20-30% of a developer's time, not even coding. So that's great. So we've been talking a little bit about HTTP. So is Cloud Run only for web requests, or can we process other events that aren't necessarily HTTPS related?
So Cloud Run has a container runtime contract. So that means that we will deliver the requests or the events to you via the HTTP protocol on a given port to your container. The reason we do that is that HTTP is a very familiar protocol for developers. We all know how to handle an incoming HTTP request. So that's why we've decided to send those data to your container via HTTP. However, those do not necessarily come from client web requests. Like, it's not necessarily one user in a browser that sends a web request. It can be, for example, PubSub that pushes an event to you that will be delivered via HTTP, but at the end of the day, this is an event that actually is pushed by PubSub. I mentioned a Cloud Scheduler. Well, Cloud Scheduler can privately and securely invoke your Cloud Run service via the HTTP protocol, but never there was a publicly exposed endpoint in the story. It was always fully secured with permissions where only Cloud, let's say, only Cloud PubSub has the right to invoke this particular Cloud Run service. And so like this, you can really push events to your Cloud Run service. Of course, if you are into serving web requests, Cloud Run does that very well. Every Cloud Run service can be made public, and in that case, you have a publicly accessible HTTPS endpoint that you can use to send requests to. And in both cases, for PubSub events or for web requests, Cloud Run will scale to handle the incoming traffic. So if suddenly there is a huge number of visitors on your website, Cloud Run scales up. If suddenly there is a huge spike of events in your PubSub topic, and the subscription is pushing a lot of events to Cloud Run, then Cloud Run will also scale to handle these on demand.
It's also a good point, just not having to worry about the infrastructure. What happens if Black Friday hits and all of a sudden you're getting hammered by people wanting to buy product, and you don't want to have to think, well, do I need to provision nodes on the back end to make sure that they're ready to go? So automatically scaling, again, managed is great. We take care of all of that for you. You just worry about your code. Now, earlier I mentioned, how I was technically playing with Cloud Run before Cloud Run, because last year during Next, we announced a pretty interesting open source product called Knative. So let's talk a little bit about what Cloud Run is relative to Knative.
So how does Cloud Run relate to Knative?
Right.
You're right, 2018, we announced and open sourced Knative. So Knative is two things. It's a standard API to run serverless workloads on Kubernetes. So Knative comes with a few components. It comes with Knative serving to serve serverless workloads. It comes with Knative eventing to do a lot of the event binding to your serverless workloads. It has other pieces like a client, like Knative build. Cloud Run came after. So we started by open sourcing a reference API as well as a reference implementation of that API. So two things really, there is the API and the implementation. All of them are available on GitHub. Knative.dev is our brand new website for Knative. And so this is where you can learn about the project, you can contribute to it, and you can run it anywhere Kubernetes run. So you install Knative anywhere you can run Kubernetes. Now this is both a reference implementation and a reference API. What Cloud Run and Cloud Run on GKE offer is actually an implementation of the Knative API managed by Google. So in the case of Cloud Run, the fully managed version, we expose the Knative API to you, and that allows us to share the tooling with the Knative ecosystem. So every tool that has been designed to work with the Knative API will very easily work with Cloud Run. And if you as a company, you decide to build around that API, then you know that you can port your workload from a fully managed environment or to your GKE cluster, or even anywhere you can install Knative. So Cloud Run exposes the Knative API and asks you to use the Knative run container contract. So you know what I mentioned about we send the data, the web request to a given port on your container. This is actually the Knative container contract. Your container has to respect that contract. Cloud Run on GKE installs in your GKE cluster a version of Knative that is automatically updated for you, as well as configured for you to work very well with Google Cloud. So for example, your Cloud Run on GKE as well as Cloud Run come out of the box with Stackdriver monitoring and logging integrations. And for Cloud Run on GKE, you can check that checkbox when you create a new GKE cluster, and it's way easier than installing things manually, both Kubernetes and Knative. And this time, it's the updates are managed by Google for you.
Right, and the usage is simpler too, because Cloud Run on GKE, when you install that, then it appears in the Cloud Run, the UI, the console UI, but then also you have the G Cloud component. Like, I've done the manual Knative install. It's not terrible, but there's a lot to worry about and a lot to think about. And then once you have it installed, actually using and deploying, you're looking at a ton of YAML just to do all of that. Whereas the Cloud Run, it's integrated with Google services, so it becomes super easy to use components like Cloud Build and whatnot, just to take your code, put it up into the build a container, push it into your deployment, and you're good to go. So simplifies it by using the managed version of Knative, the Cloud Run.
So you're right, actually. So we can summarize by saying that Cloud Run and Cloud Run on GKE are two managed versions of the Knative API offered by Google. We have many partners on the Knative project that are also offering managed Knative as a service. And the beauty of it is that because we all share this API, because we all agreed on this container contract, then workload portability becomes much easier.
Yeah, talking about, when we always talk about cloud native when we're talking about Kubernetes and containers, Knative seems to be the next iteration of that, to where I have that portability and I'm avoiding any kind of lock-in because it's this open source tool that can be deployed anywhere.
And the beauty of it is that we've seen customers starting, for example, with the fully managed version of Cloud Run, and at one point they realize they need maybe bigger machines. Cloud Run, only gives you 2 gigabytes of RAM maximum today. So, what they decided to do, they just changed their deployment target. Instead of deploying to a fully managed region, they deploy to their own GKE cluster. And from a developer perspective, it's really the same experience. But what they were able to do is customize a little bit more the machines on which the Cloud Run services were running by customizing the GKE cluster.
All right. Well, I'm sure everybody here is excited to hear what Cloud Run offers today, but let's talk a little bit about the future. I know a lot of things are hush-hush, which is expected, but what can you share today about what we can expect to see with Cloud Run in the near future?
Yeah, so we really launched the public beta, as we said, a month ago. Since the launch, we learned a lot, we listened a lot to the feedback. Thanks again for everybody who has provided the feedback, both during the alpha or during the beta. What we already delivered on Monday of this week is we already addressed some of the feedback that we've heard. So for example, customers were telling us, oh, the fully managed version of Cloud Run is great, but I wish I was able to connect to my MySQL database that I have in Cloud SQL. So until today, there were ways, but they were not really recommended. Right now, we announced support for Cloud SQL as a direct integration, so you can securely and privately connect to your Cloud SQL instance from your Cloud Run service. Customers were asking for more visibility into their Cloud Run services, so we decided to change the default view of the Cloud Run service page that now shows you your key metrics and key performance indicators as when you click on that page. So the Cloud Console UI has been a bit updated since Monday. And of course, we hear, many developers have been from all around the world have been using Cloud Run. And yes, today it is only available in one region in the US, but we announced that we are starting to expand to more regions. So you will see many more regions coming in the following weeks and months, of course.
Right. And
so these are the things that we really addressed a month after the launch. Then the longer roadmap and things to come are more around getting to general availability. As this is our top priority, to be honest. We have many other features to add, but getting to GA is what customers are asking for. They want something stable, which it already is, but GA actually says it officially. They want something with service level agreements, where GA is bringing it to them. They want something where that is available in more regions. So as I mentioned, we are expanding more regions, and that is actually part of our GA rollout. We also have heard a very strong feedback that is, I want my Cloud Run services to be able to connect to my VPC network. And so we are actively working on that. It is a feature that has already been made available on App Engine and Cloud Functions. So Cloud Functions and App Engine can now connect to your VPC network. For example, if you want to use a memory store memcache, you can now do so. And so that same feature will come to Cloud Run via what we call serverless VPC connectors. So you basically connect your Cloud Run service to your VPC via a connector, and that feature will come within a few months, for sure. Definitely, it is part of our GA scope to deliver that feature, because we've heard it was high requested.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I mean, seeing that we're listening and we're going to deliver whatever we can to make this a better customer user-driven experience is great. And really quick, while we have a few more minutes, we can mention that that out of the box today, it actually integrates with a lot of Google Cloud products. So if you're using, say, PubSub we mentioned earlier, Cloud SQL, I've used it to store cloud stuff in cloud storage because, as you mentioned, it's stateless. So your files need to go somewhere when you're using it. There's a lot of other products within Google that it can connect to.
Yeah, one database product that I recommend is Cloud Firestore, which, Cloud SQL is great, but at the end of the day, you're still talking in terms of a SQL instance that, you have to scale or is always on. In Cloud Firestore will really be the serverless data storage for your structured data. It really scales from nothing, you put nothing in it, you don't pay anything, to really a lot of data with this same serverless pay for usage mental model.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in today. I'm glad we were able to tell everybody about Cloud Run, and hopefully we can get some people to go and sign up and use it right now and tell us what you think about it. Thank you for tuning in, and please visit Cloud on Air for more content from Google Cloud experts.